Today we're taking a look at one of NVIDIA's cheapest graphics cards ever released, the GT 1030. But unfortunately I don't have the good one, because while most people probably remember the GT 1030 as a cheap little 2GB graphics card that could actually handle some light gaming, NVIDIA eventually released a different version, the DDR4 version, and boy, it was significantly slower. So today I want to see just how bad the DDR4 GT 1030 really is. And more importantly, whether this thing can play anything in 2026. The original GT 1030 launched back in 2017 and was never meant to be a serious gaming GPU. It was mainly designed as an inexpensive graphics card for systems that either didn't have integrated graphics or just needed something a little more capable. It only pulled around 30 watts and didn't require any external power connectors, which made it a pretty popular upgrade for those old Dell, HP, and Lenovo machines. And the original version honestly wasn't terrible for what it was. As long as you kept your expectations in check, you got 384 CUDA cores, 2 gigs of GDDR5 memory, and a 64-bit memory interface. Again, nothing impressive, but for esports games, older titles, and indie titles, it could get the job done. But then NVIDIA decided to make things a little confusing. In 2019, a new version of the GT 1030 started showing up with DDR4 memory instead of GDDR5. And that may not sound like a huge deal if you didn't know a whole lot about PC components. It's still called a GT 1030, still had 2 gigs of VRAM, and used the same Pascal architecture. But the memory bandwidth absolutely tanks. And because the GT 1030 already wasn't a particularly powerful graphics card, taking away that much memory bandwidth really hurts it. And that's actually the version I have here today. We're not testing the GT 1030 people remember, rather we are testing arguably the worst GT 1030 NVIDIA ever made. So let's go ahead and get into the specs of the test bench and go over the details of our particular GPU. For the CPU, we have the Ryzen 9 7945HX. This is a 16-core, 32-thread CPU based on the Zen 4 architecture, with a 2.5 GHz base clock and up to 5.4 GHz boost, plus 64 MB of L3 cache, which comes all built into this sweet motherboard CPU combo. Now, to pair with the CPU, we have two 48 gig sticks of DDR5 RAM running at 5600 megatransfers. For the star of the show today, we have the GT 1030, which comes with 384 CUDA cores, a base clock of 1227 MHz, and a boost clock up to 1379 MHz. And 2 gigs of VRAM, which again we have the DDR4 memory variant, which drops our memory bandwidth by nearly 65% compared to the GDDR5 version. So let me know down below if you have used one of these, and if so, was it the DDR4 variant or the original? And what games did you enjoy playing on this? Now, before we get into testing, I want to take a moment and talk about today's sponsor, Twingate. When an employee leaves your company, how long does it actually take to make sure they can't access anything anymore? With a traditional VPN setup, you could be dealing with old VPN credentials, lingering remote access, shared logins, or credentials that are still sitting in a password manager. That's where Twingate makes things a lot easier. Twingate integrates directly with identity providers like Google, Okta, LDAP, and Active Directory. So when you disable that employee in your identity provider, their access through Twingate is revoked immediately. There's no chasing down individual VPN accounts or wondering what you forgot. You get centralized access control, a full audit log, and a much cleaner offboarding process. If you want to check out Twingate, use the link in the description. A huge thanks to Twingate for the constant support. Let's get back to the program and find out just how well the GT 1030 does in today's benchmarks. For the first title we're going to be taking a look at today, we have Fortnite running at 1080p on the performance preset. I feel as though this is a great title to start things off with. It perfectly represents, while yes, this is a bad GPU by all means, it can still play some of the latest games out there. I bought a GT 730 specifically to play CSGO, and it did great. If this is all you got and can afford, by all means you can have a great experience. Just like with most things in life that require budgeting, you have to have your expectations in check. So if you want to play Fortnite on this GPU, you definitely can. Next up we have GTA 5 Legacy Edition, where we had a mix of normal and high settings at 900p, which made for a pretty enjoyable experience. If you want to get better FPS, you can always drop this to 720p, or lower the settings even further. For most games tested today, I didn't even bother with playing them in 1080p, and that's really going to affect the performance and give us a lot more frames. In the end, in GTA 5 Legacy Edition, we received a 40 FPS average. Now, for another title that a lot of people probably bought a card like this for, we have Counter-Strike 2. This card made a lot more sense back when CSGO was still around, because you could get a ton of frames out of a little GPU like this. But CS2 is a much harder game to run. At 1280 by 960, using the lowest settings, we only managed an average FPS of 63. That's not great at all if you're trying to have a competitive experience, especially in a game where higher frame rates matter so much. But if you're just wanting to hop on and play CS2 casually every once in a while, it still gets the job done. And to be fair to the GT 1030, I tested this on Nuke, which is one of the harder maps in the game to run. Next up, we've got a title that genuinely surprised me, Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord. At 900p using the very low preset, the GT 1030 managed a very playable 44 FPS average. Now, Bannerlord isn't the most GPU intensive game out there, but it's still a fairly modern title, and I really wasn't expecting this little card to handle it this well. As you progress further into the game and start getting into much larger battles, I'd expect the frame rate to drop a bit more, but I'd still be surprised if it consistently fell below 30 FPS. For a GPU like this, that's actually pretty impressive. Taking a look at Days Gone, which released on PC back in May of 2021. I had the game set to 720p using the lowest preset, and even with everything turned down, we only managed a 27 FPS average. For a lot of people that's going to be unplayable, and for me personally I'd call it unplayable too. But I also know plenty of people have played games at much worse frame rates than this. If you're really craving Days Gone and the GT 1030 is all you've got, you could probably make it work. I know, I definitely would have when I was younger. I used to play Minecraft for 10 hours a day at 20 to 25 FPS and had absolutely no problem with it. So while I wouldn't recommend this experience, I'm also not going to pretend nobody can enjoy it. Here we have Tomb Raider from 2013 running at 900p on the high preset, where he ended up with an average of 33 FPS. And once again, I'd still consider this playable. If it were me though, I'd probably drop the settings down to medium, just to smooth things out a little and keep the frame rate more consistently above 30 FPS. For a game this old, I was hoping for a little more, but considering we're dealing with the DDR4 GT 1030, this still isn't a terrible result. For the last two games I tested, I'll cover them pretty quickly because the results were pretty similar. First up is Forza Horizon 6 at 720p using the lowest available settings. We only managed an average FPS of 20, which for me just isn't playable. You could always try dropping the resolution even lower and using resolution scaling if you really wanted to squeeze out a few more frames. But at that point the image quality is going to take a pretty big hit. And finally, we have Cyberpunk 2077 with a similar setup at 720p using the lowest preset. The GT 1030 averaged just 14 FPS. At that point, I really don't think lowering the resolution or using more aggressive resolution scaling is going to save the experience. Cyberpunk is simply too much for this card, and this is probably the clearest example of where the GT 1030 has finally hit its limit. Now, in conclusion, if you've watched any of my videos before, I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but I really don't think there are bad GPUs, there are just poorly priced ones. If you can get one of these for free or dirt cheap and it's all you've got, there's still tons of great games out there that this GPU can handle. Minecraft, Roblox, Fortnite, older Bethesda titles, Mount & Blade Warband, and the list goes on and on. It really is what you make of it, and that's one of the things I love so much about PC gaming. It's also a big part of what got me into PCs in the first place. For the most part, no matter how low end your computer is, there's going to be some great game out there that can run on it. You don't need the newest GPU or some crazy expensive setup just to have fun. Now, enough philosophy. If you do have the choice between the GDDR5 and DDR4 versions of the GT 1030, definitely go with the GDDR5 model. You're going to have a much better experience. And these cards can still make a lot of sense for low profile systems and old office PCs where you don't have much room for power or upgrade options. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.